Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. For those of you here at SupplySide, for those of you watching live with our live stream, and for those of you watching in the future on our YouTube channel. We are here today to celebrate Natural Products Week, Natural Products Industry Week. And it's super exciting that that's what this is. SupplySide this year is happening in Natural Products Industry Week. And with me, closest to me, I have Lauren Israelson. Lauren is the founder and president of the United Natural Products Alliance, UNPA. That's this cool pin right here. If you join, you get one of those, so that's a benefit. And on the far side there, my dear friend and colleague for many years, Heather Granado. Heather is in charge of sustainability and partnerships for our Informa events operated in Europe. So that includes VitaFoods, Food Ingredients, and all of the others. And of course, many of you know Heather because of her many years here working with me on the SupplySide program. So I want to start out just with a little bit of background here. Well, actually some show announcements that we have to give first. Today's show, we're open till 5:30. There's a ton going on out there, so be sure to visit the show floor. And tonight we have the Naturally Proud Network reception. Everyone is welcome to come join us at that. It's a wonderful event. If you still haven't connected to the Wi-Fi, select the network SupplySide West 23 and just agree to the terms and conditions, and the code is Cactus 4237, and that'll get you your Wi-Fi here on the show floor. And we hope to see you tonight, as I said, at the Naturally Proud Network networking reception. But let's dive into celebrating Natural Products Industry Week. There we are. That's us right here, live in person. And I want to start out, Lauren, you put together, we've all been around for a while. That's why we're up here, right? We've been through a lot, and we've seen this industry, this show, the entire world change a lot over those years. And so when I saw the announcement that this was, designated Natural Products Industry Week, I got pretty excited. And Lauren reached out to you, Heather, and I'd love for you to just share a little bit of background on how we got here and some of the things that have happened over the years. I think we have a couple of slides to show you that. There we go. So why? Why is this important, and especially in the context of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, and we have an anniversary coming up with that too.
We do. Thank you, John. When we speak of the natural products industry, within this community, we really think about dietary supplements. And this is the one category that has always been vexing, both for the government and for the industry, that until DSHEA, we did not have a green card. We had no legal status at all. And consequently, a show like this would have been impossible, because who would invest in a marketplace that was so uncertain that regulators could come in and they would literally shut your business down? They were chasing companies around everywhere. There was a sense of fear. There really was. It was palpable. And it came to the point where we realized, after considering every possible option, we literally have to pass an act of Congress. And when I say that today, it's almost a joke, is like, Congress can't seem to find a Speaker of the House, although I'm told they just did, so that's a miracle.
There you go.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. So we did, and I got involved very early on. My first part of my career, I was at Nature's Way, so I was in the middle of those battles directly with FDA. And I had formerly worked for Senator Orrin Hatch, and he is a champion of the industry. I use the present tense because I think in spirit he is with us still. And since I'd worked for him, and he is a true believer, uses supplements, I went to him and asked if we could have his support, explained our problem, and he said, I'm in. Go get me a Democrat in the House. And that is Bill Richardson. And between the two of them, that was the beginning of what we now call DSHEA. And that was in June of 1992. And it was an improbable journey that at the beginning, just by pure coincidence, I was in Virginia, just across the river from DC, at a big conference. And I was at a table with an industry group, and at the very next table were three very senior FDA people. And somewhere during this meeting, a young man runs in and leans over and whispers into the ear of the most senior of the FDA people, and he says, Senator Hatch has just introduced a bill for dietary supplements. And the eye rolling was obvious. And I watched the guy, I could read his lips actually, and he said, it won't go anywhere. Don't worry about it. The guy leaves. Well, it went somewhere. And it became a landmark piece of legislation that has changed this industry profoundly. And it was an extraordinary effort that what we didn't know was the strength of our consumer base. They rose in our defense. And this is a rare thing to happen in the way it did during DeShay. The other ally we didn't know we had were Hollywood celebrities. And we have the famous Mel Gibson video that is legendary. And for those that have never seen it, just put in Mel Gibson vitamins and it will pop up on YouTube. And it was the 2.5 most extraordinary years in my career.
That's right when you and I got into this industry, right?
It really is, yeah.
Really early on.
Actually be able to think back and, you talked about a trade show like this. Well, at the time we had, the Natural Products Expos and wow, tie-dye and Birkenstocks and, it accelerated the growth. So when we look back on almost 30 years to celebrate Natural Products Industry Week, it really fundamentally changed the nature of the industry. It changed the business, the people that you saw coming into the industry. Within just a couple of years, I would say, what we saw, all of a sudden it changed from the t-shirts and you had all the muscle booths, and all of a sudden you saw the suits coming in. And you saw the investment coming in because suddenly there was regulation and there were consumers, and they went, consumers believe in these products. They want these products. And that's a great opportunity. So you saw all of a sudden huge acceleration in the market.
Yeah, there's when you're in the main lobby before you come into the expo hall here, we have a bunch of displays. There's one, if you get a chance, check it out. It's huge, and it's a timeline of the dietary supplement industry, and it begins back in the early 1900s and walks through a lot of these things. And then right next to it is a beautiful display that shows industry sales of dietary supplements. And it's true. When the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act became the law of the land, it brought legitimacy to the industry. It brought that framework. It brought security to where investors, larger companies said, oh, this is a real thing now. And so the money came in, that backed up the research and the science, the whole thing. And that's the time that we got into the industry. That's the reason Supply Side is here. We launched our first magazine in 1995, 9 months after the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act became law. So I hadn't thought of that before, 9 months. So we gave birth to Health Supplement Retailer.
There you go.
And then its sibling, Supply Side, came shortly after that.
Right.
But that was 30 years ago, right?
30 years goes really fast, but yeah.
Yeah.
The challenges remain.
Challenges remain. Something that's worth pointing out, I think, is that when DeShay passed, first there was this short pause of silence, kind of on all sides. What just happened? And most people, when they talk about how DeShay was passed, they speak of it as being unanimously passed by Congress. That is technically not true. It was passed by unanimous consent, which is a procedural step. And so DeShay was passed at 11:24 p.m. in the last 30 minutes of the Senate being in session. The House had already gone out of session. And that this was literally time off the clock, running across the end zone and doing a stretch and catch as the clock runs out. And that was DeShay. And there was no second chance. That was going to be it. One thing that I've found so interesting is we've seen the economic effects and the lexicon of consumers as they've adopted the language of the natural products industry. People talk routinely about all sorts of botanicals that were foreign language previously. And it just tells you, if you listen to people in daily conversation, how ingrained this industry is in the culture of society. And that, I think, is deeply meaningful because it's now rooted. We really have roots that will support a large industry. right after Deshay, we were a tender plant. We had a lot of topside, a lot of growth, but still the root structure was a little weak because we didn't have a lot of the technical things worked out. Over the years, I went to hundreds of conferences when they really had sit-down conferences and seminars, and so I kept a box of these, and there's about 120, and I put them in chronological order. I was just very interested in what were the topics. The vast majority of these were technical, interestingly enough. It was analytical, it was scientific, it was interest groups that were coming from the pharmaceutical industry, the US Pharmacopoeia. It was because of Deshay that they began to develop monographs and standards for dietary ingredients. Previously, and we went and spoke to USP, said not interested, it's not a market, but for Deshay, USP would have little involvement. And that's the gold standard. What people have to appreciate is in the global marketplace, being USP really means something. And now USP has a full staff of people whose job it is to work on supplements. They're active, they're here at the show. They're actively involved, and that's true of many technical organizations as well. I'm particularly proud of the success and the advancements in the science and technology that accompanies developing innovative products. We have a ways to go. There's still a lot of work to do. But without Deshay, we never would have made those investments.
Look at the numbers that are up on the screen right now from 1994 to 2024. Again, Heather, time you and I were just really kind of starting our careers and getting into this stuff. It was a $4 billion, which is not small, but a $4 billion market, dietary supplements. Today, $60 billion. And it's not just the money, right? Like it says, it's the jobs, it's the tax revenue, and the most important thing is the impact on public health. Now, most Americans, by far,
Huge majority of
take
Americans.
dietary supplements.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and hopefully, the more they learn, the more they have a positive experience with them,
Right.
then they continue to take them. It's a challenge, though. I do think that that's a challenge we're looking at in the natural products industry is, how do we make sure that we're delivering safe, efficacious products to consumers that are really benefiting their health?
And that's on us. Certainly there are regulations. We have the Food and Drug Administration. There are a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people with responsibility. But ultimately, it comes down to us, our businesses, our people, what we do as an industry to accept the huge responsibility that comes with the products we make, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, and the public trust, ultimately.
I think public trust and individual consumer trust is paramount. The minute you lose that, all is lost. Anything else that we do becomes unimportant. And a good example of that is today, FDA is suffering a loss of public trust as they have never seen before, to the point that this is now a matter of public discussion at FDA. And they've taken a highly unusual step of bringing in another organization that is the think tank that advises FDA to literally be a surrogate voice to speak for FDA, because trust in what FDA says has gotten to a point that people don't believe it.
Right.
And that's a remarkable state of affairs. Now compare that with how they would view our industry, and we should really take stock of what level of consumer trust we enjoy. I feel that it's relatively high, and if you were to look at across all industries and government, if you ask consumers, I think that you'll see that there is a relatively high trust level, and they trust us with the most important thing they have, which is their health, and that of their children and their parents. And it's fairly obvious to me that the gap that was never filled by the food industry or the drug industry, where they left this gap, were traditional medicines. It was a natural approach to work through a life. It's not when you have special needs as an infant, and it's not when you're at the end of life. And it dawned on both the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry is we hold the secret to the span of life, to offer products from birth to death. And this is why we see them at Expo West in such numbers, is that they've realized that whether we knew it or not, that we were serving that full spirit. But if you look at traditional medicine, it's obvious that's what traditional medicine did. From the moment before a baby was born, there would be wise women and tribal shamans that would be looking after, and they would be a part of a community, and there would be ceremony. And I mentioned that very specifically, is that people need to feel it and they need to believe it. And this is a belief-based industry. And I believe that's why consumer trust is high. And that despite all efforts by critics, and we have many critics, is that that bond with our consumers has never broken because belief is at the center of it. Those that attack us from a scientific point of view have always been surprised and disappointed that those attacks just don't seem to go anywhere, despite the headlines. And when you consider the reason for that, they don't think in terms of belief. They seem to be cynical about it, is how I view it. So above all, we have to appreciate that we do the science, we do the hard work, building a really high quality product, but remembering the beating heart of this industry is the belief of our consumers. And the minute we stray away from the philosophy and the deep belief structure that exists within our culture, this is our greatest risk. If they see us drifting away, we're in trouble.
And they're our greatest strength, not just because of the money they spend as consumers. These people are also voters. These people are advocates. And that's what really came to life 30 years ago, right? I remember that. All the letters, all the faxes, all the phone calls back when we communicated that way. There wasn't a lot of tweeting going on at the time.
There was no tweeting. There was virtually no emails.
But it got Congress's attention and it made them act because these were voters. So now we have even more of them. More than 75% of American adults use dietary supplements. Why? That's quite a block right there. Tell me 75% of Americans do anything right now, and it's pretty tough to believe that. But
Right. Well, and they're also sharing their belief. So it was always, if your friend told you something, you're much more inclined to do that. Now, if you look at the power of social media and the people who are out there advocating for what they do, and some of it, is it actually? But they believe, and I love that idea, that they have this belief, they're sharing it because they truly want to improve other people's lives. Whether that's a particular product, it's a brand, it's their lifestyle, you buy into this. All of that feeds into, I guess, the roots. When you talked about the tree, and we're looking at, it was just a sapling, now it's a tall tree, but trees can topple if you're not actually feeding them, watering them, caring for them. And probably if you think about that consumer trust at the roots of everything else that happens, what do we need to do then in order to further and support consumer trust and belief in our industry and these products?
I mean, I love talking about the history. I'm a nerd for all this stuff, but history's history, and we are where we are today. It happens to be in Natural Products Industry Week. So I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about where we think we're going or should go or what we should do. But first, Lauren, could you just, how did we get Natural Products Industry Week, right? It was Senators Lee and Sinema. Could you just share a little bit of that for those who aren't familiar with how this came about?
Yeah. That if you look at on a state level of who has supported this industry most strongly, you have to look at Utah first. And people often ask is, what is the deal? Why is there such a massive industry in Utah? And the answer is threefold, is that there was a pioneer tradition when the Mormons came to Utah in 1847. They brought with them their traditional medicines, but they also brought a religious belief in the importance and the value of herbs, that they were placed on earth for a reason, to a higher purpose. And that's where this belief that is deeply embedded in many people comes from the same source. Whatever the religious background is, you will find that in the history that the monasteries of medieval Europe they were the ones that had the medicinal herb gardens. They were the ones that held the books and the knowledge. And if you were sick, or if you had sinned, which are considered to be the same thing, is that to commit a sin, the body would be ill. You would go to the monastery or to the nunnery to be absolved of the sin, but also to be cured of the physical ailment. So they held the knowledge of the plants and they had the spiritual traditions. That has never gone away. And in this culture, the U.S. culture is deeply embedded in a religious tradition that really blends directly with the natural products tradition. That's the one secret that I think people don't really realize, and that is most clearly seen in Utah. The second step is that it was the Silicon Valley moment, and that is kind of the coincidence part of it, that there was a very famous herbalist named John Christopher, and he was between the 1940s until his death in 1985, that he was the greatest herbalist in America. And he had a school in the hills of central Utah, and he taught generations of young herbalists. And people would think, are people really studying herbalism? Oh yes, and way more than people realized. So these little young herbalists would go out, and then they would build a practice. And so he perpetuated the knowledge, and he kept it together. And he did something that is very typical of a traditional healer. He published all of his formulas and his knowledge in a book called The School of Natural Healing. Big book. No copyright. He gave it to the public. And his mind is that knowledge belongs to all of us. And so he did what every traditional herbalist and shaman and healer would do. Is they don't do it for profit and money, and he was in that tradition. He gave that to the industry. Well, there were companies that now had access to his formulas, and suddenly there was Nature's Way, there was Nature's Herbs, Nature's Sunshine, and there was a whole generation of companies that grew exactly at the same time in Utah in the late 1960s. And that was the creative moment that happened in Utah. Those 4 companies, which is highly unusual, were all successful. Usually at least 1, 2, probably 3 of those would have failed along the way. All 4 became large and successful companies to this day. But then they spawned other companies. Employees say, I've got a good idea, I'm going to go try this. So now you have hundreds of companies in that Utah environment, and it's easy to hire people because they don't have to sell the house, the kids don't have to go to a different school, they just go from this side of the valley to that. And so we have a very unique environment, which really works. So that was the second key. And the third part is that the Mormon Church has a very strong missionary program. They send young men and women out to the world. They learn a foreign language very often, and they become very capable, very confident in communicating and dealing with people. And that is really what built the direct selling industry in Utah. And so when you think of that concentration of large direct selling companies, they had a tremendous workforce of people who spoke a foreign language, who had very good people skills. The 2 requirements, if you want to sell either domestically or in foreign markets, that was unique in the United States and in the world. And so there was a massive head start that Utah had to build out that part of our industry. So there is a very specific and unusual history that's tied around Utah. Our sister state is Arizona, where these 2 are from, is that Arizona is really a template of the Utah model in many respects. And so it makes perfect sense to me that Senator Lee of Utah and Senator Sinema of Arizona, coming from states that have a high respect for natural health, would be the 2 that would get together as a very conservative Republican and is now an independent, I believe. Is Democrat, Republican, it's hard to tell. And so I was delighted to see that they had done this. So that was a kickoff point. What we have on the screen, and where are the screens? Yeah, there they are, is we started this tradition ourselves in Utah. So this is from, we did one in this is the 1995, that we had a Utah Natural Health Week. And it was a week long. We had a series of educational events and a big formal dinner with Senator Hatch. And we did it for the very same reasons that we're now doing it, to have Natural Products Health Week here, as well as next year when we really celebrate the 30th anniversary. So we're talking about doing as many state resolutions and declarations like this one. And what that does is it reminds the political leadership of the state, oh yeah, this is a big industry. And part of the celebration is demonstrating our economic growth and success and importance, the number of their voters, taxpayers who use products that are employed in our industries, So Utah and Arizona can easily lead the way on this from our senators, but I think we should do this also at the state level. But I can see a dozen other states easily joining in. And part of my vision for next year is that we have as many states as we can, all declaring a natural health week, recognizing the 30th anniversary of the SHEA.
That would be amazing. And if you think about then taking it right back to what we talked about, the consumer trust, the interest in the products, how do we go all the way back to where you had the blackout drapes over the aisles? How do we take it into the retail stores so there's an understanding from consumers about access, growth, health opportunities? Can you bring new consumers in? You know, all that you could do. Media loves a good story around positive health, economic impact. So I love that for next year. I'm issue a challenge, whoever's out there, to develop that out.
If you have a business that happens to be in a state, then you qualify.
Then you qualify to be a part of this.
Yeah,
It's great.
but imagine if we, like Heather said, bring the retailers in, the local media, educational events, get your experts out there talking, open your doors, give tours of your facility to the public, to healthcare providers, to your legislators, members of the state government and your federal representatives and senators. Would have quite an impact in this 30-year anniversary and set the tone for the future, where the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act came about because of a threat. Our industry was going to go away, all of it. It was literally going to go away. Now, as we get into this 30th year, the threats are always there. We have adversaries out there. They're not going away. They still believe our industry should not be here, and they're going to continue to be here. But instead of waiting for that threat, can we take a different approach and go out and be proactive and tell this amazing story that you've shared just a sliver of, but it's a truly amazing story. And out there are thousands of these amazing stories. Companies, people, the impact they've had on public health. It goes on and on. Can we tell that story starting next year and accelerate this positive change that our industry has really been a part of?
Yeah, it's been a long road, and to your point this morning in the UNPA meeting, when we were talking about FDA and who is the new, what's the new structure, government agencies have a really long memory, and FDA, I'm sure, is still not real thrilled with the passage of DSHEA and how things were laid out for the regulatory structure. So to think like, oh, we've got 30 years, everything's good, I'm not sure that's accurate.
The pendulum swings.
It does. It does. I think as we consider how do we celebrate our 30th anniversary, and there are many anniversaries of all sorts. It turns out the 30th, I was interested, so what is the 30th? You have the gold, silver, different colors. 30 is pearl. And I thought, that's a lovely symbolic, I think, because the pearl has a very different connotation than metal. And if there's anything that would represent us as an industry, it's that pearl, truly a natural product, that's born out of great irritation and difficulty. And it seems like it fits us perfectly. So I love the symbology. I think we should use it. Is that we're the pearl of, I would say, the health community. That we bring something that is joyful, that is actually beautiful in its natural state. You don't have to do a thing to it. Just leave it alone and let it be what it is. And that there's so much negativity in the world today. Is that if we celebrate what is all good about our progress and the promise that we bring to people, I think this is what people want to hear. That will bring them to us. And critics can say whatever they want. The less energy we spend just talking back to them is wasted time. Is our message is what people want. Stay on mission, and let's tell them what we do well and invite them to be a part of this marvelous tradition that is part of human history. And we'll be fine. But we just can't stray off message and be true to it. And one of our great risks is that in this particular moment of such advanced technologies in synthetic biology, much of that is on the edges of our industry, really wanting to be a part of all of this, let us be very careful, very thoughtful as to what's appropriate for us as an industry and our consumers. That there's probably a very fine, maybe invisible line that if we step across, it'll be very hard to step back over that. So I just urge caution, and this period of celebration is that we really think well, think carefully, as we're moving into this new world of all sorts of things, advanced technologies, AI, drones, 3D printing, all of which are very exciting, but do they support this mission? And to the extent they do, they're welcome, but if not, let's show some discipline.
Right.
Heather, final words? I know the clock says 0. But
You know what? I'm very inspired. I love the idea of the pearl because, you know, one of the wonderful things about it is it wants to be worn. Like, they are constantly polished because you love them. And yeah, grown out of great irritation, a thing of beauty that we embrace and we celebrate.
Wonderful. So, yeah, please. There are so many new colleagues out there coming into the industry every day. It's our responsibility, I believe, each of us, to welcome them, to give them this information, these stories, to pass this along so that they have the knowledge and the context when the next threat or opportunity comes up. And let's really make next year a big deal. 30 years of Vishay, the impact we've had on public health, these incredible businesses. We've gone from 70 exhibitors at the First Supply side to over 1,400 this year. So many good stories, and we're doing the right thing. We're helping people stay healthy. You're a couple of pearls. I want to thank you for your time to come up and share your stories and all you've done and will do moving forward. And I would encourage all of you to do the same. Let's go out and change the world together. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.